Beam Living is a property management company that oversees 16,000 multifamily units housing 30,000 residents. Our speaker today has over 15 years of experience helping organizations create a continuous feedback culture. Today, he'll share about how he and his team live their mission every single day to create great places to work, great places to live, and great places to grow. Please welcome one of the finest operators you'll ever meet, Beam Living's Chief Operating Officer, Rei Moya.
How we doing? Pumped for day two? You just had coffee, come on. Pumped for day two? That's what I'm talking about. All right, so as Bob said, I'm Ray, Chief Operating Officer of a company called Beam Living. First off, to get something out of the way quickly, my name is spelled a little bit weird because my full name is actually Reinier, R-E-I-N-E-R. Naturally, I got tired of people pronouncing Reinier wrong, Rainer, Reiner, reindeer. So I decided to change it to something shorter that they could pronounce wrong instead. When I first got asked to come and speak at this event, I had no idea that I'd be sharing the stage with the likes of Magic Johnson, Diana Nyad, and so many incredibly talented humans. So after my first prep call with the safety culture team, they asked if I had any questions, to which I replied, yeah, just one. Why in the hell did you invite me? Because the truth is, I'm no one special. And no offense to all the incredibly talented people who've been presenting to you for the past 2 days, but they aren't either. What this group, and pretty much every successful person and organization in history have in common, is the constant pursuit of better. The reason these people have found success is because they never settled for good enough. And whether they realize it or not, I guarantee you, they all subscribe to the philosophy that I'm about to share with you all today. So, with that, I'd like to introduce you to Betty. Sorry, wrong Betty. Just a sec. Okay, getting closer, still not right. She's an icon, but not quite there. There we go. Better today than yesterday. BTTY. The constant pursuit of being 1% better every day. And while I can't take credit for coining the phrase, I can say that it's a concept that I and so many others owe our successes to in life, even if we don't realize it. But before we dive into Betty in a bit more detail, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my story and why this concept has been so important to me throughout my life. My story begins in an area of Miami known as Little Haiti. You can see the stud there in that photo. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's the latter. It's like a lot of places in America, low-income neighborhood of about 30,000 people, where the median household income is less than $20,000 per year. My father, never having made it past the 6th grade, worked as a laborer most of his life, picking up whatever work he could to provide for the family. And despite us not being able to afford it, my mother's job as a librarian at a private Catholic school enabled my 3 sisters and I to attend. Fast forward to the summer after high school graduation, my mom, younger sister, and 16-year-old me moved out of our childhood home and into a mobile home park after my parents separated. That summer, Mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, which sent our lives into a tailspin. Rather than go off to college like most others, I ended up working multiple jobs to try and make ends meet. Thankfully, I can say that my mother is alive and well today and has beaten cancer's ass twice already. Love you, Mom. But the result of that very difficult time in my life was that I never went to college, so career progression was destined to be an uphill battle for me. So after bouncing around a bit, I eventually started working my way up the ranks of the hospitality industry and landed at the Boca Raton Resort and Club as their convention setup manager. Now, this is an important detail in my story, but I want to pause for a second and take you down a different path and touch on the topic of fear. Particularly, I'd like you to think about how our society treats fear. As much as emotions can be positive or negative, which is generally the wrong way to think about them anyways, fear is almost universally expressed as a bad thing, something to be banished. President Franklin D. Roosevelt famously said, "The only thing that we have to fear is fear itself." Unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts. Fear comes in all shapes and sizes, and typically those around us will push us into overcoming those fears with one big action. A shy person encouraged by their friends into plucking up the courage to speak to their crush. A child learning to ride their bike, facing that daunting moment when the training wheels come off for the first time and their parents encourage them not to be afraid. Whatever it is, we're pushed, prodded, cajoled, incentivized, exposure therapy, drugged up, down, and sideways into banishing fear from our lives. We're expected to be courageous. We're expected to be brave. We're expected to go against our very nature. Because you see, fear is an incredibly important emotion. Without fear, none of us would be here. It's this completely basic, primal thing that keeps us alive, alerting us to danger. Some research has suggested that our ape-like ancestors developed something called the Hypnic Jerk, a term very similar to what my wife calls me when I'm being annoying, which is a trait that prevented them from falling asleep in an unsettled way on precarious branches. Literal, involuntary, life-saving fear. So fear deserves a little bit more respect than it gets. In fact, I'd say it deserves a lot of respect. In today's world, fear can be paralyzing. And like the instinctual fear of our ancestors, modern fear tells us to stay out of harm's way. It prevents us from taking that first step. The voice inside our head tells us not to set big, hairy, audacious goals for no reason other than the fear that we might not achieve them. But finding ways to overcome that which we're afraid of has been paramount to human progress and innovation. So while fear can lead us down a path of self-improvement, it's more of a setting off point, not a map for the journey. For that, we have Betty. As my earlier attempt at humor made clear, Betty isn't a person. Betty is a powerful idea, an ethos that all of us know and have probably lived at some point in our lives. It's an idea that our speakers are all living proof of. It's an idea that the founders of this country understood, writing in the preamble to the Constitution that they sought to form a more perfect union. A more perfect union. Not a perfect one, but a work in progress. And that's all of us, really. Great, well-intentioned message, just knocking around, bumping into one another and ourselves, but trying to be just a little bit better along the way. And that, friends, is Betty. Betty's the creation of Kelly Voss, then general manager at the Boca Resort, and now our CEO at Beam Living, and someone I'm proud to call a close friend. And that's really where I first heard the concept of Betty. It came to Kelly when he was feeling a little bit overwhelmed by all the things that needed to happen to fix the iconic resort. Kelly realized that trying to tackle all of our problems at once was getting him nowhere and only leading to a feeling of constant defeat when change didn't happen as quickly as he'd like. And if you knew Kelly, you'd realize he's not one to be patient or to enjoy the feeling of getting dragged down by defeat. He realized he'd be going about it all wrong and that the best way to tackle big problems wasn't to solve everything at once, but to focus on small, incremental improvements one day at a time. Now, was this particularly revolutionary? No, and I think Kelly would be the first to admit that. But the power of Betty isn't that it's some profound thing. It's really its accessibility. Taking something slow, hard, and for so many people terrified of taking that first step, and making it friendly and accessible to all. The concept of pursuing just 1% better every day doesn't seem so intimidating. It's accepting fear, accepting our flaws, and committing to change in a way that anyone can accomplish, taking things one day at a time and focusing on small, incremental improvements. It's a concept that can be applied to any aspect of our life, really. A way to slow things down when we're feeling overwhelmed. A way to take that big, hairy, audacious goal and break it down into more manageable bits. That's Betty. And for all of us at Beam Living, we think it's quietly one of the revolutionary reasons for our success. It's part of our secret sauce, if you will. And because you're all such a good-looking and attentive audience, we decided to let you in our kitchen and show you our recipe. Let me take a step back and get a little bit of context out of the way. Tell you about Beam. Beam Living is one of Blackstone's wholly owned portfolio companies. We're a vertically integrated real estate management company owning and operating over 14,000 apartment units in New York City. The most recognizable of our communities is StuyTown Peter Cooper Village, which comprises over 11,000 units and 100 plus buildings in East Village in Manhattan. This iconic development, by many measures the single largest residential development in the world, is one of the most unique communities in New York City, sitting on 80 acres of green space and housing nearly 30,000 residents. So while we call ourselves an owner-operator of real estate, we're really more like a small city government. And if running a small city isn't difficult enough, we do so in one of the most highly regulated housing markets in the country, where the regulations just seem to be getting stricter every single year. When I first joined Beam back in 2016, we had around 450 employees managing one, albeit massive, property. Since then, we have welcomed a further 250 team members and acquired 3 other large assets in the city. We've increased our resident satisfaction scores by over 200%. Our net operating income growth has outpaced our comp set 5 years in a row. We built an in-house design and construction team from the ground up to execute on over $100 million in capital expenditure per year. We stood up an entire food pantry over the course of the pandemic to provide food to food insecure households in New York City. And we've helped do our part in the transition to a more sustainable future by installing close to 10,000 solar panels on our rooftops, the equivalent to taking nearly 12,000 cars off the road for an entire year. And those are just a few examples of how Betty has played a real role in Beam's continued success. But where we find it most powerful is with our humans. Instead of me talking about that piece, I wanted to let them share and speak about it themselves. So here's some of our teammates telling us what Betty means to them. What's up, Chris? Can you tell me what Betty means to you?
Betty means to me, well, taking my wins and losses from the previous day and taking today being a better person, not professionally, but also personally.
Betty means there's always room for growth. There's always a way that we can improve.
To me, it means, I guess, taking the knowledge you have on a daily basis and applying it the next day in a positive and productive way to not only help yourself, but everybody that you're working with.
Well, for me, it really means being 1% better every single day than the previous day.
Long-term, incremental change. Slowly, progressively making things better for everybody around us.
Wow. Betty to me means making a conscious effort to make your community and society as a whole better.
Try to make sure that every day I come to work, I try to learn something new. I try to add something more onto my plate just to better myself, better my team, so I can teach better as well.
To me, it's about positivity. No matter how rough the day before was, no matter how rough today looks, it's about a positive attitude and starting the day fresh.
Betty means to me we are constantly learning, growing, and evolving.
What's up, Kelly?
Hey, how you doing?
How are you?
I'm good, man.
Hey, I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
What does Betty mean to you?
So for me, Betty, and it's a long time, I've been saying the words for about 8 years now, it's about better day than yesterday. And I believe that we all wake up in the morning to put our 2 feet on the ground, hopefully, and try to be the best partner, friend, colleague, husband, father, brother, sister, whatever it is for you. It's about continuous improvement. I need to be 1% better today than I was yesterday, because that compounding interest just stacks up. I could be 3.5 times better in a year, and everybody just like, oh, I gotta change. Just change a little bit, and that will stack up, and it will just be massive.
Love it. Thanks for sharing.
So friends, I want to wrap up by coming back to something I said at the beginning. The constant pursuit of better is hard. It's a slower path in a world that increasingly seems to value speed, novelty, and instant gratification. It requires putting aside our egos, stepping back, and realizing we're like unfinished blocks of marble sitting on the table, not perfectly sculpted specimens on display. One swing of the hammer isn't going to create a masterpiece, but focusing and slowly chipping away at the imperfections, focusing on one piece at a time, that is what will ultimately allow us to craft our own statue of David. And Betty invites us to realize this. It's not a solution or a self-help guide. It's simply a tool we can use to remind ourselves that we're all on the same journey, and we all have the capacity to do great things. So my challenge to you is to not only think about how you can be a little bit better each day, but also why it's worth your effort. Because Betty tells us that we can always be better leaders, better partners, better parents, friends, or simply just better humans. It assumes that all of us can grow and change, and that we owe it to those around us to grow and change with them. At Beam, we believe in the power of Betty, especially its ability to impact the world around us for the better. And that's really what life is all about. And now that you've all been introduced to Betty, we hope that you'll join us in leaving the world just a little bit better than we found it. Thank you.
So you're in the most competitive real estate market in the planet.
Yeah, that's probably an accurate statement.
Lots of multi-tenant places to live. So how do you actually attract residents?
Yeah, great question. So in New York, I think it's all about differentiators. So figuring out what your differentiator is. You know, people care obviously about price and location. That's always important. But I think really we owe our success to the foresight that our ownership group had. So we're owned by Blackstone, Ivanhoe, Cambridge, two different investment firms. And they wanted to take a different approach to New York City multifamily real estate. Typically, you know, I don't know if anyone familiar with New York City, but landlords have a bad rap, right? It's just all about sucking out every ounce of profit you can get, and it's actually kind of accurate for the most part. That's how many landlords operate in New York City. So what they did was recruited somebody from the hospitality industry when they first purchased StuyTown back at end of 2015, and wanted to take a different approach and kind of take that hospitality approach. You go to a hotel, you know, anybody who's staying here in Vegas, I'm sure you had great customer service when you walked in, right? Everybody's attentive, and you call up and you need something, they're all over it, right? So they wanted to apply the hospitality approach to what we did in managing real estate, and it's really been successful. And that just word of mouth spreads, and you know, people, hey, it's a different experience living at StuyTown or a Beam Living property. And I think that's really what's helped us set ourselves apart.
Fantastic. So every summer is your busy season. You have 2,000 residents move out, which triggers a pretty lengthy process. So I move out, and now you've got to come in and assess what I left you, right? You got to put a bunch of processes in place to clean things up before somebody else can move back in. You know, what was this process like when you started, and what's it like today?
Yeah. So I'm going to pitch iAuditor here. Is that okay?
I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You guys okay with that? Okay. so just to help everyone understand what that process is. So like Bob said, 2,000 apartment turns a year. Majority of that happens in like a 3-month span over the course of the summer. Very seasonal business. So obviously really crazy. This past year in August, we did 1,000 move-ins in the month of August. So like 1 month, 1,000 move-ins. You can imagine what that's like. So what we have to do is go into the apartment. So the day that somebody vacates, go in the apartment, inspect it, assess it for damages, because you got to bill damages back to the prior resident, and then create a scope of work, get that scope of work to our contractors to come in, get the apartment ready for the next person that moves in. Then you need an inspector to come back, check it again, sign off on the work, make sure it's good, right? All that happens over the course of the summer and at this volume, right, in 8 calendar days, not even 8 business days, 8 calendar days. And we have to do that. So 1,000 times in a single month in 8 calendar days, need to execute on that. So when I first joined Beam, that was all handed off to a third party. They did everything. Kind of a fox watching the hen house too, because they were giving themselves the scope of work. So it was kind of like, why are we doing it this way? So dug into it in the spirit of Betty, right? So how can we do this a little bit better and figure this out? And decided to internalize a portion of that process, leveraging iAuditor. And you know, the beauty of iAuditor, it's built to be, you know, first and foremost a safety inspection tool, but I like to get creative with stuff, so decided to see how far we could push the limits of iAuditor, and essentially what we did was took it and used the scoring component. Anybody familiar with iAuditor? You got the scoring component. So took that and actually used it for pricing. And through, you know, open API, I like to tinker. Went on Zapier and was like, hey, what can we do with you know, some of this API stuff? And we have pre-negotiated pricing with our contractors. If you're doing 1 coat of paint in a 1-bedroom, we know how much that's going to cost, 2 coats, et cetera. So built that into the inspection template and built out all of the pricing. So our inspector goes in, inspects the unit, can take the photos, obviously with the iAuditor tool, checks off what needs to get done. That automatically, as soon as they complete that inspection, pushes it off to the former resident to give them their bill for whatever damage they might have, pushes off a scope of work to the contractor to come in and do the work, and also says, hey, this is how much you should bill us, contractor, because we know what this price should be, right? So now you can't rip us off. We know exactly what that should be. Sends everything to accounting, so they have it all. It's all teed up. So all of this happens just auto-magically, right? So you press a button, and through the API connections, all that gets sent off. So we really streamlined that process, brought the inspection component in-house, still leverage third-party contractors, but we're able to save a ton of money in the process and become much more efficient in hitting that goal of that 8-day window. So really powerful tool, and I think it speaks to the flexibility of the product. So
excellent, thank you. And is there a goal? Are you trying to get to 7 days in the spirit of Betty? 6, 5?
Don't push it.
Okay, hey. Just,
maybe one day, yes.
Yesterday, Magic spoke about the importance of teamwork. Your CEO, Kelly Voss, who's a longtime safety culture friend, he really pushes teamwork quite a bit. Not pushes, he lives it. But one of the things he said one time was that I work for my team, not the other way around. And I've seen from interactions with you that that's the way you go about your business as well. Could you tell us how that philosophy's kind of percolated down throughout the organization?
Yeah, totally. So yes, Kelly's been saying that since I've known him for a little over 8 years now, I think. So we believe in the upside down org chart, right? And a lot of companies do that, I think, maybe more so now. But the reason we do that is because we believe that's a visual representation of our role in the organization, right? So I'm sitting at the bottom of the org chart in my mind, because my role is to support everybody in the organization who's making it happen, right? So all the weight and the burden should sit on my shoulders, because I'm here to support them. I don't do any work. They're the ones actually making it happen every single day, right? I'm just here to support them and help, lead them and help them do their jobs more efficiently. So we believe that that's a really good visual representation of our role in the organization, is that upside down org chart. And one of our cultural responsibilities, so company values, we refer to them as cultural responsibilities because we wanted a little more oomph to it, right? We believe you're responsible for these things, is help others win. And look out for the person to your left and your right before you even look out for yourself. And if you believe that everybody in the company is doing that, you got nothing to worry about, right? So listen, we're not perfect. We don't always get it right. Not everybody hits the cultural responsibilities every single day, but it's something we always strive for. So,
well done.
Yeah.
So we heard from the Lieutenant General earlier, and she once said that grit is the ability to not be defeated. The personal story you shared at the beginning about your childhood is as gritty as it gets. So undoubtedly, throughout your journey, there's been periods where you had some self-doubt, perhaps some imposter syndrome. How did you kind of power through those low times to turn into a COO of a Blackstone operating group?
Yeah, so still have imposter syndrome.
Give me both.
Yeah, I think it happens unless you have this big, massive ego, which some people do, but I think almost everybody's experienced it. So if you haven't, maybe check your ego. But everybody's experienced it at some point, right? It's real, and I still feel it every single day. One, I think having an advocate or somebody who really believes in you is important, right? To remind you that, hey, like, you don't suck, because I tell myself that all the time. My wife's here today, and she tells me that all the time, like, you don't suck, when I come home and I make a mistake, and it's like, oh, should I even be in this position? Like, I don't deserve to be here. But I think it's really just, reminding yourself that you're not what you are on paper, right? Just because you have all this, this great resume or pedigree, or for me, I work with Blackstone all the time. They're known for, Ivy League MBAs, right? That's what they got. So I'm sitting here with no college degree and at a board meeting with this group of Ivy League MBAs sitting across the table from me. But it really speaks to the power of Betty, right? And just every single day trying to get just a little bit better, right? So somebody who might have gone and graduated from some fancy school, if they're not taking that same approach, guess what? I'm going to catch you, and I'm going to pass you at some point. Yeah. So just reminding yourself that and the power of that, I think, is really important.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
One question, and then we'll maybe see if there's any from the audience. You and I were talking backstage about how COVID affected your business, and you shared a very resident-centric story about how you took care of your residents that it really in a time that they really needed you the most. Could you just elaborate and share that for the audience?
Yeah, so as I think everybody probably was aware, that New York City got hit really hard with COVID in the early days. So we had residents who were looking to evacuate the city, right? Hey, I don't want to live in New York anymore, or lost family members or lost their jobs and couldn't pay rent. So really, really tough time for the city. So us as a landlord housing, 30,000 people, not insignificant. We heard from them, and a ton of people reached out, and hey, I can't live here anymore, and we had some really tough choices to make, and I think it speaks to, again, our ownership group in supporting our decisions to do the right thing. Also, one of our cultural responsibilities is do the right thing, and when we say do the right thing, it's do right by our teammates, our residents, our community, and our investors, right, in that order. So it's a very particular order. We're here to make money, yes, absolutely, but we believe we do that through approaching it that way, right, in that order. So taking care of our residents was important. So we decided to let our residents break their leases with no penalty. Hey, no problem, you need to get out of here and go. We got it, which resulted in record vacancy and big hit to the business. So it was extremely impactful. But again, thankfully, ownership was supportive of that and supported our decisions around that. We set up a residential financial hardship program, so we allowed people to defer their rent till they got back on their feet and put them on payment plans. So we did what we could to really help support the community.
I think that's incredible.
Yeah. Thanks.
We have a question from the audience.
My question is, I love this idea of this really slow, concentrated, intentional change. How do you maintain that in such a fast-paced industry where I imagine your expectations are nothing short of fast and intense?
Yeah, really great question. Really good question. It is tough because you can't always apply it to everything necessarily. Sometimes you have to react, and that's the reality. But I think it's always like centering yourself again is what's really important, because fire drills pop up and you don't have time to approach something with that mentality. It's like we just have to go pandemic, right? It was like boom, it's here. You have to go and figure it out. And you then I think go back and reflect on that and try to learn from those experiences when you don't have the luxury of taking your time and trying to chip away at something. And you go back and kind of Monday morning quarterback and hey, like what could we have done differently and how do we take this away, and then start to apply the Betty philosophy of continual improvement from that point on. So you may have to make quick decisions or reactions or do something that isn't ideal. But then you can go back, reflect on it, and build off of that in the future.
Wonderful.
Hey, Ray. Thanks for coming in and sharing your story. I was just curious because you've overcome, a lot of challenges to get to where you are now. What's inspired you the most along the way, and who are those mentors for you, if that's Kelly or whoever else that is, and what advice do you have to people growing and leading in their career as to how to find those great mentors?
Yeah, really good question. So yes, Kelly is definitely one of them, and another gentleman by the name of Rick Haydock, who was actually the CEO that Blackstone recruited to come up and really kick everything off with StuyTown when they first bought the property. And the two of them, just one with Rick, I think the compassion that he led with was just so intriguing. And the reason I took the job in New York, we worked together at the Boca Resort, and Rick got recruited to go up to New York, and he offered me a job as literally like the head trash guy. I was director of environmental services. I'm downplaying it a little bit, big union team, 160 people, so it wasn't an insignificant job, but the reason I came up to New York was because of him and because of his leadership. And same thing with Kelly. I remember when I was at the resort, I was convention setup manager and had applied for an open position, director of banquets. And it's a $50 million a year banquet operation at the hotel. I was 26 or 27 at the time. No business applying for that role, but I did. And I ended up getting it. And I remember going to lunch with Kelly, and I had asked for a certain amount. I way lowballed myself because I just wanted to get the position. And I remember sitting there at lunch, and he said, "Hey, we're going to give you this," and it was more than I had asked for. And he said, "We believe that that you have more potential than you even realize," right? And that stuck with me, and I was like, holy cow, I got somebody who actually believes in me. And that was really powerful. And I, from that point on, just never wanted to let, either of those guys down. It was like, I am not gonna let you down. So, I think for up and coming, leaders, it's always about, I think, taking on more and not expecting more. That's what I've done throughout my career is, hey, give me more responsibility. I don't care if I get more money, it doesn't matter. And if you're working with the right people, right, and some people can take advantage of it, so I'd caution you if you're not the right company. I think safety culture is the right company to do that in, because you guys are awesome. But you know, if you're working for the right company and you take that approach, like give me more responsibility. I've always done that and never asked for more. It eventually comes, right? It's like, just take it. Like, I want to learn, I want to grow. Give me. Take it all on, and you know, the money and the titles and all that stuff will eventually come.
Excellent. Looks like we got one more.
Hi. Thank you for your speech. It was great. So I just wanted to talk a little bit of you talk about fear at the very beginning, right? And so one of fears of mine is actually just becoming complacent, and you have the 1% better every day. And so what have you done, or what advice could you give people to just keep going and keep trying to, you know, get to a point where, you know, okay, I'm having a good life, I've achieved something really good, but you still want to keep pushing, right? So how do you keep doing that? How do you keep motivating yourself after day?
Great question. I think it's about figuring out what your life purpose is. I'm gonna get a little deep here, but I think it's about figuring out your life purpose. So for me, and I didn't figure this out until I think my late 20s, I decided that I wanted to make a positive impact on as many lives as I could within my scope of influence, and to continue to increase my scope of influence over time, right? And every decision I've made throughout my life has always been based around that, right? So taking the job in New York, for instance, was, I wanted to go work with, you know, an awesome leader, but I realized that I now had the ability to impact this massive community, right? So after researching events, like, wow, look at this population. So if I can make a difference, I can now impact like all of these lives. So I think having that, like, you know, kind of just ultimate goal in mind of what is my purpose here? Why am I here, right? Because humans all just want purpose. So what is that purpose, and reminding yourself of that every single day, and then also just not letting failure get in the way. You're gonna fail, it's gonna happen. You know, you might be 1% better every day, and you know, then all of a sudden you slip 15%, 20%, and you slide way back. But keep on chipping away at it, and you know, focusing on that end state of, you know, what's that ultimate goal. So.
Beautiful. Well, one last one for you. It's a fun one.
Sure.
You're an avid superhero fan.
Yes.
Who's the best superhero and why?
Yeah, easy. Best superhero is Superman.
Okay.
Not because of his powers, though. So I think Superman's greatest power is not his super strength, speed, laser vision, all that stuff, right? All that's awesome. I'd love to have any of those powers. But his real superpower is his altruism, and the fact that this guy can go and take over the world if he wanted, right? He could do anything he wants, but he chooses to do good and to help other people, right? So he's completely selfless, and I think that that's his greatest superpower. So that's why he's my favorite superhero.
Not only is he an incredible leader and an incredible operator, he's also a great guy. So thank you so much, Ray. This is wonderful.
Appreciate it.
Nice job.